How long have you been baking bread?
I've been baking professionally now for 3 years. For 3 years before that, I used to do renewable energy consulting down in DC, and outside of work, I was really just into eating food and cooking food, and I randomly made a easy French bread recipe from Mark Bittman's How to Cook Everything book, and that blew my mind, and like from there I just got obsessed with bread and being kind of a science-oriented person. I got really into the chemistry of bread, and especially the chemistry of sourdough bread, and that's kind of where the obsession kind of came from. And it just got to the point where I wanted to quit my job and get out of working in an office because it was just a bit depressing for me. It's been 3 years now, and it's been great. Just moved around to a couple different places, learning from different bakers, and now I'm here at Robertas. I've been here since May.
And you're the head baker here?
Yes. Yes.
So what does that mean?
As far as being the head baker right now, that's something that I just took over a little bit over a month ago. So we're in charge of all of the bread and pastry for the restaurant and for the wholesale accounts. We provide bread to some grocery stores and restaurants all around Brooklyn, mostly like kind of northern Brooklyn, everywhere from Williamsburg to downtown Brooklyn and Dumbo and Bushwick area. Everything all of our wholesale accounts, all the bread is delivered by bicycle, which is a little crazy. A lot of fun for those guys because it's we're delivering 7 days a week in any and all weather conditions. So it's a little wild.
Tell me about your oven.
The oven we are baking in right now is it's kind of a traditional design. It's a wood-fired oven that is just this massive brick oven that's built into a shipping container that is sitting outside in our garden.
What does wood-fired mean?
So wood-fired oven means the whole oven as itself is it's not plugged into anything. It's kind of its own contained system. So in order to bake bread, what you're doing is literally within the baking chamber, like on the hearth, which is basically made up of, which is bricks, fire bricks. You're building a massive fire for hours and hours and building up all of this heat in the oven. And the heat saturates into the layers of brick, so it's very thick. You have maybe, say, about like a foot or so of these like fire bricks and insulation that are absorbing all this heat from the fire. And once you reach kind of a certain temperature, we have these temperature gauges within the oven. You then kind of spread out all the coals and shut off the oven, and all of the heat evens out and kind of saturates further and further into the outer layers of the oven. So really, once you kind of stop burning the fire, you have like this finite amount of energy that's stored within the oven, and that's what you're going to use to bake your bread. It's through radiant heat. So the next day, when you get in the morning, you clean out the oven and you mop it down to start dropping the temperature because it gets very, very hot.
How hot?
We've been building the fire and building the temperature of the oven up to about 1,050, 1,060 degrees Fahrenheit. But by the time I start baking, I'm baking at the highest temperature on the hearth I'll be baking at is around 650 or 655 degrees. What was I saying? Kind of lost my train of thought there. Yeah. So basically, when you load bread into the oven, heat from the bricks is basically just being directed right into the bread, and that's what's baking it. So as the bricks on the hearth and the dome, like directly on the baking chamber, put their heat into the bread, they're losing their temperature, and that's where you have the outer layers of the outer like brick layers that have all this stored up heat as well. The heat migrates from the outside to the inside of the baking chamber, so it kind of recharges the heat, and that allows you to continue baking like multiple loads of bread. but as it is a finite amount of energy in there, the temperature of the oven does drop with each load of bread that you put in. So each subsequent load takes longer and longer to bake. So by the end, like, yeah, you just have much lower temperatures, and just waiting for the bread basically at the end, which is what we're doing right now.
Yeah. So the first time I heard of $6 a loaf bread, I nearly pooped myself. But then I saw like what went into it.
Yeah.
Because it's not a 30-minute pop some bread in the oven process. When do you actually start making the bread?
So the process really begins about 72 hours before the final product comes out of the oven. And that's why, we have to get our orders in that far ahead so we can plan it out. But most of our breads are completely 100% naturally leavened, which means they're made with a sourdough culture. And so we're constantly feeding that. It's kind of like it's a living thing, basically. It's a mixture of flour and water that contains kind of a symbiotic relationship between lactobacilli and yeast, some type of Saccharomyces. And they kind of live together and ferment, and they're what is kind of flavoring the bread and giving you that kind of acetic acids and lactic acids that are giving you that like sourdough taste and that acidity.
So it proofs for a couple days, and then.
So we build. So today is Tuesday, and Monday afternoon, right at the end of our shift around noon, we built the final sourdough feed for the dough that sourdough culture matured all the way overnight until we got in very early this morning. And we started mixing doughs that we're going to bake tomorrow around 6 a.m. this morning. So those doughs were then fermenting for a few hours, and we're just at the point where we're dividing and shaping them right now. And then they'll go through another long cold fermentation in our walk-in refrigerator overnight, and you get a really slow rise, which helps develop a lot more flavor, especially with sourdough bread. And so tomorrow morning when we come in, I'll probably go out to the oven around 5 and begin baking off those loaves. So it's a really long process, and there's many hours that go into it.
And there's no dough machine popping out the perfect chunk size or shaping these things.
Everything is done by hand. The only thing, we have a mixer that we use to mix the dough. But we do very, very gentle mixing. We only use speed 1 on our mixer, as you really don't want to overmix your dough. And that kind of lends, if you're looking at the bread too, you get this for the baguette dough, which is more of a white dough, it has a really creamy kind of color, which is actually what flour should look like. Not when you overmix dough, it oxidizes the dough and turns it really white, which is what you see with a lot of supermarket spongy, really, dough that if you squeeze it, just kind of smushes together.
Gross.
That's overmixed, oxidized dough. So we're very gentle, and you also see with our bread kind of a translucent crumb, which if you see in the crumb structure, you can kind of almost see through it, and that's just a sign of very gentle mixing and handling by the baker. And
what's the best way to store the bread? Because that's a concern that a lot of people have. They say their bread goes stale really fast. I know there's a secret.
With sourdough hearth breads, like what we're baking, I'd say our bread comes out really crusty at first. And so for the first 24 hours, just to keep that crust, I recommend storing it in a paper bag. Or if you're going to have it out on your counter, right on your breadboard, if you cut into it, then put the cut side, stand it up on its end and put the cut side down on your cutting board. And I think that's good for about 24 hours just to keep that initial crust. And then after that, I'd recommend putting it into a plastic bag, and just keeping it out on your counter, and that will help extend the life of the bread for 4 or 5 days. Sourdough bread in general keeps longer because it's got a lower pH, so it kind of staves off bacteria growth for a little bit longer than regular kind of commercial yeasted breads. I would say don't put your bread in the refrigerator because that kind of dehumidifies the bread and accelerates the staling process, really. If you want to keep bread for longer, I would suggest freezing it, either as a whole loaf or pre-slicing it, and then you can wrapping it in foil and then putting it in a plastic bag and then putting it in the freezer, and then you can pull either slices or an entire loaf as you want, and then I would just heat it up either in a toaster or in your oven at 350 for 8 or 10 minutes, and that'll just freshen the bread back up and pretty much bring it back to life. But yeah, definitely would switch to plastic after 24 hours. I think that's really important. And then you'll just have to toast it, but toast is great.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to tell our CSA members about the bread or the process or anything?
That's a tough question. Would you mind if I got up for 1 second? And maybe I can think about that for a second. I'm freaking out about the bread.
So you're back. You checked on the bread.
Yes, the bread is almost done. I got about half of the batards out, so just a few more minutes.
They say that bakers are a little crazy.
Maybe a little bit. Definitely tend to keep strange hours, which can make you a little crazy, I suppose. Right now we're getting here at 2 a.m. every day, and everyone's working 6 days a week right now, so I think you get a little crazy. We definitely don't have a normal sleep schedule at all. Probably have a little bit of a warped sense of humor. I think everyone in the bakery, everyone thinks we're a little weird.
You are.
I think you have to be weird. I'm not sure what else to say about the bread.
What about yourself, or why you do what you do, or anything you want to share with us? I never really pictured years ago thought that I would end up being a baker, but it just kind of happened, and now this is my life. I know I'm going to be doing this forever, and I just want to keep learning and keep trying to make the best bread possible. I'm really excited right now about the opportunity we have at Robertas. I'm really interested in kind of introducing some new breads, and I think it's just a really great opportunity for everyone in the bakery right now to do something cool, and cool.
Hopefully we'll make it better than ever.
Any new breads for the CSA, maybe?
Maybe. I've been working on this buckwheat walnut bread, and I would love to introduce an olive bread, maybe with some herbs. I'm not really sure yet, but there's definitely a lot of ideas floating around in my head right now. So hopefully we'll be doing that as soon as things settle down a little bit here.
Cool. Well, thanks for your time.
No, thank you. How was that?